You wouldn't believe how a simple spilled drink could change the course of my life. One moment, I was just another waitress at an upscale restaurant in Manhattan, juggling trays of overpriced food and cocktails, and the next, I found myself at the center of a situation far beyond anything I had ever imagined. It started like any other Friday night, the hum of conversation mixing with the clinking of glasses and the sizzling sound of the kitchen. I moved between tables, the weight of my apron filled with tips, and the faint scent of garlic and herbs clinging to my uniform. As I approached a particularly lavish table adorned with fine china and crystal glasses, I caught a glimpse of the man sitting at the head. Dominic Caruso was a name that sent shivers down the spines of many. His reputation preceded him, powerful, dangerous, and undeniably magnetic. He had an air of authority that made the world around him fade, and in that moment, I could feel the eyes of the entire restaurant on him. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his dark hair expertly styled, and when he smiled, it was as if the room brightened. But behind that smile was an intensity that hinted at the darkness lurking within. I approached the table, my heart racing as I balanced a tray filled with drinks. As I leaned over to serve, disaster struck. My foot slipped on a stray napkin, and in an instant, the tray tilted. Red wine splashed across the pristine white tablecloth, soaking into the fabric and landing perilously close to Dominic's lap. Time seemed to freeze as I stared in horror, my breath caught in my throat. I could see the moment of surprise flicker across his face, quickly replaced by a mask of calm. "I'm so sorry," I stammered, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. I fumbled to grab napkins and dab at the mess, but Dominic raised a hand. "Relax," he said, his voice smooth and commanding. "It's just a little wine." His dark eyes held mine for a moment longer than necessary, and I felt a strange flutter in my stomach. I was supposed to be mortified, but instead I found myself captivated by the way he spoke, the way he carried himself. As I cleaned up the mess, I caught the gaze of the older man sitting next to Dominic, his father, Marco Caruso. He was clearly at ease in his son's presence, and in that moment, I realized the connection between them was more than just blood. It was a bond forged in the fires of a life filled with challenges. After a quick exchange of pleasantries, I returned to the kitchen, my mind racing. I had heard stories about Dominic and his family, whispers of their involvement in the darker side of New York's underbelly. But seeing him in person was a different experience altogether. I shook my head, trying to rid my thoughts of him. He was trouble wrapped in a charming package, and I had no intention of getting involved. However, it seemed fate had other plans. Later that evening, as I was finishing my shift, I noticed Dominic standing by the entrance, speaking quietly with his father. Just as I was about to walk past, Marco turned to me, a warm smile on his face. "You did a good job tonight, young lady. Thank you for taking care of us." His gratitude was genuine, but it was his son's piercing gaze that held me captive. In a moment of impulse, I found myself smiling back. "Thank you, sir. I hope you enjoyed your dinner." Dominic stepped closer, the air thickening with an unspoken tension. "You have a talent for making a mess of things, don't you?" His smile was teasing, but there was something deeper behind it, a challenge that stirred something within me. "I prefer to think of it as adding a little excitement to the evening," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. He chuckled, and for a fleeting instant, the world around us faded away. Just then, I noticed a flicker of movement in the shadows outside the restaurant. My instincts kicked in, and I glanced back at Dominic, who seemed to notice as well. "Stay here," he commanded, his tone shifting to something more serious. Before I could protest, he stepped outside, leaving me in a whirl of confusion and curiosity. A few moments later, I heard raised voices followed by a loud crash. I rushed to the door, peering outside just as two figures collided with Dominic. My heart raced. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. But before I could even think, I found myself rushing toward the chaos. "Dominic!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the tension. The moment he heard me, he turned, his face a mixture of annoyance and something else, something protective. "Get back," he barked, and just as I hesitated, a hand reached for me from behind. It was Marco, pulling me back just in time. I watched as Dominic handled the situation with a grace that belied the violence brewing around us. With a swift movement, he knocked one of the assailants to the ground, asserting his dominance. It was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. When it was over, he turned back to me, his expression softening. "I told you to stay put." "I couldn't just stand there," I replied, my voice shaking. "You were in danger." For a moment, our eyes locked, and in that charged silence, I felt a connection forming, something that felt both dangerous and exhilarating. I had crossed an invisible line that night, and there was no going back. As I walked away, I wondered if I would ever be able to escape the pull of the Caruso family. I felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension as he spoke. The tension around us seemed to dissipate, but his gaze lingered, making my heart race even faster. Dominic Caruso was not a man to be dismissed easily, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was far from ordinary. As I hurriedly cleaned up the wine spill, I caught glimpses of the other diners, their whispers barely disguised behind their menus. I could sense their curiosity, and it made my skin crawl. After a few moments, Dominic leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "You've got a steady hand, I'll give you that. I've seen more experienced servers crumble under pressure." His compliment, however casual, felt charged, as if he were assessing more than just my professional skills. "Thank you, I try," I replied, attempting to keep my voice steady. My eyes briefly flicked to his companions, men dressed similarly to him, all radiating an air of power and intimidation. I had heard stories about men like him, untouchable and ruthless, the kind who ruled the underbelly of the city. Yet here I was, caught in his orbit, feeling inexplicably drawn to his presence. As I finished cleaning up the table, I felt the weight of his gaze on me. It was a strange mix of interest and something deeper, a flicker of understanding that made me uneasy. I didn't know whether to be flattered or frightened. "If you ever need a recommendation for a fine wine, I'm your girl," I added, hoping to break the tension with humor. He chuckled, the sound low and smooth, sending an unexpected thrill through me. "I might just take you up on that." Dominic's gaze softened for a moment, and I sensed a shift. The hard exterior he wore seemed to crack, exposing a glimpse of something more human beneath. But before I could dwell on that thought, he turned his attention back to his companions, leaving me to wonder. As the night went on, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It wasn't just Dominic. His entire table seemed to have an awareness that went beyond the ordinary. They spoke in low tones, exchanging glances that hinted at secrets and unspoken deals. I moved between tables, but my mind was consumed by thoughts of the dark-haired man who had stood at the center of it all. Later, as I took a break in the empty kitchen, I leaned against the cool metal counter, trying to calm my racing heart. What was it about him? I had been around men like him before, but there was something magnetic about Dominic that pulled me in. I had to focus on my job, but my thoughts kept drifting back to his warm smile and those piercing eyes. Just as I was about to step back into the dining area, the door swung open, and in walked Dominic. My breath hitched as he stepped inside, the energy in the room shifting instantly. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, his smile disarming. "I was just looking for you." "Me?" I stammered, caught off guard. "What can I help you with?" "I wanted to thank you properly for handling that little accident," he said, his tone playful yet serious. "How about a drink?" I hesitated, the weight of my world colliding with the allure of his invitation. I'm on break," I replied, feeling the need to maintain boundaries. Just for a few minutes, he urged, stepping closer, his presence overwhelming. I could smell the faint scent of his cologne, rich and intoxicating. I promise I won't bite. Against my better judgment, I nodded. Okay, just for a moment. I felt a rush of adrenaline as he led me to a quieter corner of the kitchen, far from prying eyes. As we sat, I struggled to maintain my composure. So, what do you usually drink? He asked, leaning back against the counter, his posture relaxed yet commanding. Wine, I suppose, I replied, forcing a smile. But I'm not picky. He chuckled again, a rich sound that seemed to resonate deep within me. Good to know. I might just have to change your mind about that. The way he looked at me made it impossible to concentrate on anything else. The low lights of the kitchen cast shadows across his sharp features, accentuating the intensity in his eyes. Why do you seem so familiar? I blurted out, unable to contain my curiosity. I mean, besides the fact that you're you. Dominic's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something darker crossing his face. I've been around. You'll see me more often than you think. The weight of his words hung in the air, leaving me both intrigued and wary. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the dining area, shattering the moment. My heart raced as I turned toward the noise, instinctively knowing it was a signal that our time was running out. I should. Dominic's hand shot out, gently grasping my wrist. Wait. His touch sent a jolt through me, a strange mix of possession and warmth. I enjoy talking to you. Don't let them interrupt. I hesitated, caught in the storm of emotions swirling between us. My mind screamed at me to step back, to maintain my distance from this dangerous man. But my heart was telling a different story. A strange electricity hung in the air as Dominic's gaze lingered on me, and I felt an inexplicable pull towards him, despite the chaos I had just created. He exuded an aura of power that made my heart race and my palms sweat, but there was also a hint of amusement in his eyes, as if he found my embarrassment entertaining rather than infuriating. I couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to see him outside of this lavish restaurant, far removed from the world of carefully orchestrated appearances and tense business deals. Just as I was about to apologize again, a voice interrupted. An older man, his hair silvered and eyes sharp, leaned in close to Dominic. "You all right, son?" he asked, concern etched into his features. The moment felt surreal, as if I were intruding upon something deeply personal. The way they were connected was undeniable, and I realized this was no ordinary dinner. This was a family gathering, albeit one that seemed steeped in unspoken tension. I instinctively stepped back, ready to disappear into the background. But Dominic's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist lightly yet firmly, keeping me in place. "I'm fine, Dad," he replied, his tone flat but protective. "Just a little accident." His father turned his gaze to me, studying me with a mix of curiosity and caution. "And who might you be?" The question felt heavy, as if the slightest misstep could send ripples through the entire evening. Just a waitress," I managed, my voice faltering slightly under his scrutiny. "I'm really sorry about the wine. I'll get it cleaned up immediately." I tried to pull away, but Dominic tightened his grip just enough to hold me there a moment longer. "Don't worry about it," he said, his eyes softening, an unexpected warmth breaking through his otherwise stoic demeanor. "What's your name?" "Sophia," I replied, my heart pounding at the intimacy of the moment. I could hardly believe I was exchanging words with the notorious Dominic Caruso, the man whose reputation was as intimidating as it was intriguing. "Nice to meet you, Sophia," he said, and for a brief second, the world around us faded away. But just as quickly, the familiar sounds of the restaurant rushed back in, and I remembered where I was. Just a waitress caught in a web of high stakes and dangerous allure. As I hurried to clean up the spilled wine, I couldn't shake off the feeling that this encounter was more than a mere accident. There was something in the way he looked at me, the way he had held my wrist, that hinted at a connection I couldn't yet understand. My mind raced with possibilities as I returned to the kitchen, the chaos of the evening fading into the background as I replayed the moment over and over in my head. The next few days passed in a blur of normalcy, filled with tables to serve and orders to take, but I couldn't stop thinking about Dominic and that dinner. I had heard whispers of him around the restaurant, a shadow that loomed over the city, a man who was both feared and respected. My heart raced when I thought of how differently he had treated me, as if I were more than just a faceless server in a bustling establishment. Then, one late evening, as I was closing up the restaurant, I noticed a sleek black car pull up to the curb outside. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized the driver. Dominic stepped out, looking every bit the powerful man I remembered. His presence filled the air around him, and I felt an odd mix of dread and excitement wash over me. "Sophia," he called, his voice cutting through the quiet of the night. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond, but curiosity pulled me outside. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear my own words. "I wanted to see you," he said simply, and the sincerity in his tone took me by surprise. "I know it's late, but I thought you might like to join me for dinner." Dinner? With him? My mind raced at the implications of his invitation. I had never considered that a man like Dominic Caruso would want to spend time with someone like me, just a waitress with big dreams and a small-town background. I stuttered, glancing around the empty street for any other signs of life. "I don't know if that's a good idea." He stepped closer, a fire in his eyes that made my pulse quicken. "Why not? I promise, I'm just a man who wants to get to know you better." There it was again, that magnetic tension I felt during our first encounter, and before I could think better of it, I found myself nodding. "Okay," I managed, the word almost slipping out before I could catch myself. As we drove through the city, Dominic spoke about his life, sharing stories that revealed a side of him I had never imagined. He was candid about the pressure of his family's legacy and the expectations that came with it. I couldn't help but be drawn in, intrigued by the vulnerability that peeked through his carefully constructed facade. By the time we reached the restaurant, I felt a sense of excitement mingled with apprehension. I knew that getting involved with someone like him came with risks I couldn't fully comprehend. But as we sat across from each other, the dim light casting shadows across his chiseled features, I couldn't deny the warmth spreading through my chest. With every glance, every smile, I felt my resolve weakening. This was only the beginning, and in that moment, I couldn't help but wonder just how much my life was about to change. As the night went on, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It wasn't just Dominic. His entourage, men adorned in tailored suits that spoke of wealth and intimidation, were also fixated on me. With every clink of glass and note of laughter from their table, I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but the weight of their gazes was unmistakable. The restaurant pulsed with life, yet I felt suspended in a strange limbo, isolated by the tension that charged the air. I returned to my station, trying to drown out the chaos around me by focusing on my duties. But even as I poured glasses of wine for other tables, my mind kept drifting back to Dominic. There was something magnetic about him, a dark allure that made my pulse quicken. I had served countless tables, but none had left such an impression on me. And it unnerved me. Who was this man, really? Moments later, I caught sight of him again, his laughter echoing across the room. He was animated, charismatic, a king among men. But as I glanced at him, our eyes locked for a heartbeat. That moment stretched, laden with unspoken words and challenges, until I quickly looked away, my cheeks flushed with an unfamiliar warmth. "Hey, Madison!" A voice broke through my thoughts, pulling me back to reality. Sarah, my fellow server, appeared beside me, her brow raised in curiosity. "What's up with you? You've been acting weird since that table arrived." I forced a smile, trying to brush off her concern. "Just another night, you know how it is." But even I could hear the tremor in my voice. You're not fooling anyone," she shot back, crossing her arms. "I saw how you handled that wine spill. You were practically glowing in front of him." "Not true," I protested, but the laughter between us fell flat. I could feel the tension building again, reminding me of the eyes still on me. "Whatever you say, just remember, those guys are trouble," she warned, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They're not just here for dinner. Keep your distance." I nodded, although her advice felt impossible to follow. The more I tried to push Dominic from my mind, the more insistent he became. As the evening progressed, I found myself inadvertently stealing glances at his table. His commanding presence made it hard to ignore him. Each time our eyes met, I felt a jolt of electricity, a connection that tugged at something deep within me. I had never believed in love at first sight, yet here I was, grappling with a strange pull toward a man who thrived in a world I had no desire to enter. When the clock struck 10, the restaurant began to wind down, but Dominic and his companions were still occupied in their world of laughter and clinking glasses. As I cleared a nearby table, I overheard snippets of their conversation. The names being tossed around sent chills down my spine. Heavy hitters in the underworld, men whose whispers could bring cities to their knees. "Did you see the way she handled that spill?" I heard one of them say, casting a furtive glance in my direction. "Not many have the guts to stand their ground in front of us." I froze, my heart racing. Us. I was part of their conversation now, and the realization felt like both a thrill and a trap. I wanted to flee, but something kept me rooted to my spot. Finally, as the last plates were cleared away, Dominic rose from his chair, his gaze sweeping the room. I felt a surge of panic, realizing he was heading my way. My chest tightened as he approached, the air thick with unspoken tension. "You should consider a career in fine dining," he said. "You handled that with grace." "Thank you," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper as I attempted to project confidence. "I guess it just comes with practice." He stepped closer, the world around us fading. "You have a unique talent. Not everyone can remain calm under pressure." The compliment hung in the air, stoking the embers of something I wasn't ready to face. "I just try to do my job," I managed to say, feeling the heat of his gaze wrap around me like a warm blanket. He tilted his head, studying me with those dark eyes that felt like they could pierce straight through to my soul. "You're more than that, Madison," he replied, his tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Perhaps you should allow yourself to be more than just a server." His words stirred something within me, an echo of desire tangled with a sense of danger. "I just try to do my job," I managed to say, feeling the heat of his gaze wrap around me like a warm blanket. He tilted his head, studying me with those dark eyes that felt like they could pierce straight through to my soul. "You're more than that, Madison," he replied, his tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Perhaps you should allow yourself to be more than just a server." His words stirred something within me, an echo of desire tangled with a sense of danger. I felt exposed, as if he could see my very essence. "I'm not looking to be anything more than that," I insisted, but my voice lacked conviction. He raised an eyebrow, a smirk dancing on his lips. "Is that so?" Before I could respond, the atmosphere shifted again. A tension crackled in the air, a ripple of unease that made my instincts flare. I could sense it before I saw it. The door swung open, and a chill swept through the restaurant. A group of men entered, their presence commanding and hostile, eyes scanning the room as if searching for something or someone. Dominic's expression changed instantly, the playful glint in his eyes replaced with a steely resolve. He straightened, shifting his focus, and suddenly the light-hearted banter of the evening felt fragile, teetering on the edge of chaos. As the newcomers approached, Dominic stepped closer to me, a subtle but protective gesture. I felt the weight of his presence, the ancient instinct of a protector surfacing in an instant. My heart raced, caught between the thrill of his proximity and the reality of the danger looming on the horizon. I had entered a world far more complicated than I had ever imagined, and there was no turning back now. "Sophia," I replied, my heart pounding at the intimacy of the moment. I could hardly believe I was exchanging words with the notorious Dominic Caruso, the man whose name had been whispered in both fear and awe around the city. I had stumbled into a dangerous world, one that I had only witnessed from a distance, and now I found myself at the very center of it. Dominic's gaze held mine, a mixture of curiosity and something else, something deeper. "Sophia," he repeated, his voice low, almost thoughtful. "You have a good aim, it seems." The corners of his mouth twitched, and I couldn't help but smile back, despite the uncomfortable situation. His father, however, remained focused on me, his sharp eyes scrutinizing every detail. "What brings you to this establishment?" he asked, his tone suggesting that he was less interested in my answer and more in assessing if I was a threat or an asset. "I'm just working a shift," I stammered, feeling the weight of their attention. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Dominic's grip on my wrist relaxed slightly, and I felt a sudden urge to stay, to linger in this surreal moment where I felt both terrified and exhilarated. "It's fine, Dad," Dominic reassured. "Sophia just has a unique talent for turning a quiet dinner into a spectacle." The older man's expression softened, but only slightly. "Well, our family dinners aren't exactly quiet," he replied, a hint of pride creeping into his voice. "You might be surprised how much excitement can be packed into a single evening." I glanced between father and son, sensing the complex layers of their relationship. There was a bond there, rooted in loyalty and history, yet fraught with unspoken tension. It was evident that Dominic respected his father, but there was also an undertone of rebellion, as if they were both aware of the unyielding expectations that came with their lives. "Excuse me for a moment," Dominic said, breaking the moment as he turned to his father and spoke in low tones. I felt like an outsider, hovering between two worlds, one of elegance and power, and another of confusion and danger. As they conversed, I took a moment to observe the lavish surroundings. The restaurant was opulent, with rich mahogany paneling and glimmering chandeliers that cast a warm glow over the plush seating. It was both a palace and a prison, the kind of place where deals were made and lives could easily be shattered. My thoughts drifted to the precarious position I had inadvertently placed myself in and the chaotic whirlwind of emotions that surged within me. When Dominic returned, his expression was inscrutable, but there was an underlying warmth in his eyes that made my pulse quicken. "You must be wondering what you've walked into," he said, tilting his head slightly, inviting me into his world, if only for a moment. "Honestly," I replied, attempting to inject some humor into the situation, "I thought I was just serving wine, not crashing a family reunion." He chuckled softly, and I felt the tension in my chest loosen just a bit. "It's not every day you get to witness the Caruso family dynamic," he replied, his voice low, just for me. "Consider it a rare privilege." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. privilege to spill wine on a mafia boss's dinner? That's a new one. My attempt at light banter felt risky, but it was met with a genuine smile that caught me off guard. Not just any boss, he countered, leaning closer as if sharing a secret. I'm the boss's son. It's a whole different level of trouble. In that moment, the connection between us felt electric, a spark that seemed to dance in the air. I could hardly breathe as I realized just how close we were standing, the world around us fading into a blur. "And what kind of trouble does that entail?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The kind that keeps you awake at night, wondering where the next threat will come from," he said, his tone suddenly serious, the weight of his words pressing down on us. "And the kind that makes you reconsider who you let into your life." Before I could respond, a commotion erupted from a nearby table, drawing our attention. A familiar face from earlier in the evening stood up, their expression hostile and full of anger. "Caruso!" the man spat, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant. Dominic's demeanor shifted instantly, a storm brewing behind his eyes. "Stay here," he commanded, his tone firm, yet laced with an urgency that sent chills down my spine. I nodded, but the sense of helplessness washed over me as I understood that he was stepping into danger, and I was just a bystander. As Dominic approached the confrontation, I felt a swell of anxiety gripping my chest. The room grew tense as others turned to witness the fallout. Dominic's presence was magnetic, a force that drew both fear and respect, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to witness something far darker than I had anticipated. "Dominic!" I called, my voice rising above the murmur. He paused, glancing back at me, and for a moment our eyes locked, a silent understanding passing between us. He would protect me, but at what cost? "Just wait," he urged, a fierce intensity in his gaze, before he turned back towards the escalating situation, ready to confront whatever danger awaited him. "Whatever you say." "Just remember, those guys are trouble," she warned, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They're not the kind of people you want to get involved with." I nodded, her words barely registering over the pounding of my heart. I tried to focus on my work, but my thoughts tangled around Dominic like a vine, wrapping tighter with every passing moment. There was something in his gaze, something that hinted at a depth I hadn't encountered before. It was both thrilling and terrifying, and for the first time, I felt a connection that was beyond the ordinary. The night wore on, and every time I passed by Dominic's table, our eyes met. Each glance was electric, a silent conversation filled with unspoken desires and hidden truths. I wondered if he felt it too, the pull between us that seemed to defy logic. It was as if the universe had conspired to throw us together, and I was both excited and terrified by the possibilities. When I returned to the kitchen for a moment of respite, Sarah followed me, her expression a blend of concern and amusement. "You really should be careful, Madison. Those guys play a different game. They don't just have money, they have power. You don't want to catch the eye of someone like Dominic Caruso." I sighed, glancing back toward the dining area. "I know, but there's something about him. I can't explain it." "Trust me, the allure of power can be intoxicating, but it's also dangerous. You're a smart girl. Don't lose your head over a guy like that." I wanted to argue, to say that I was in control, but deep down, I knew she was right. There was a part of me that craved the danger, the thrill of the unknown. I had lived a safe life, and perhaps flirting with the edge was the excitement I never knew I needed. As the evening drew to a close, I prepared to collect tips and bid farewell to the last of the guests. My heart raced as I caught sight of Dominic standing by the entrance, his posture relaxed, yet his presence commanded attention. The other men with him seemed to fade into the background, their chatter a dull hum compared to the magnetic pull he exerted. "Madison," he called, his voice smooth and inviting. My heart skipped a beat, and I forced myself to walk over. The room seemed to shrink, isolating us in a bubble of shared energy. "Dominic," I replied, attempting to sound casual, though my voice betrayed my nerves. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine, as if trying to decipher a code only we shared. "You handled yourself well tonight. It's not easy dealing with my crew." "Thank you. They're certainly lively," I managed, the heat of his gaze making it hard to think. He smirked, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Lively is one way to put it, but you didn't flinch. That's impressive." The compliment swept over me, and I found myself smiling, taken in by his charm. I've had my share of difficult customers. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and for a moment the weight of the world lifted. It was just the two of us, standing on the precipice of something thrilling and terrifying. But the reality loomed. He was a man entrenched in a world I didn't belong to, and I had to remind myself of that. "Would you like to join us for a drink?" he asked, his invitation both tempting and alarming. I hesitated, the warning of Sarah echoing in my mind. I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why not?" His expression was earnest, and I could see the sincerity behind those stormy eyes. "I'm not asking you to do anything you don't want to. I just want to get to know you better." "Knowing you better might not be safe," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Your world is dangerous." He stepped closer, the distance between us disappearing. "Life is dangerous, Madison. You can't avoid it. But sometimes taking a risk can lead to something beautiful." The weight of his words hung in the air, and I felt the tug of desire pull me closer. My heart raced, a mixture of fear and excitement coursing through my veins. I had always played it safe, but now I was standing on the edge of a precipice, and for the first time, I wanted to jump. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "Good," he replied, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I'll be waiting." With that, he stepped back, allowing the moment to linger, but the heat between us was palpable. I watched as he turned to leave, his presence lingering like a shadow against the neon lights outside. As I returned to my duties, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to change. The familiar humdrum of my routine faded into the background, replaced by the thrill of possibilities. Dominic Caruso represented everything I had avoided, yet the allure of his world was intoxicating. What would it take for me to truly step into his life? And could I survive the chaos that came with it? My heart raced with questions, and as I closed my eyes for a moment, the only answer that came was that I was ready to find out. "Excuse me for a moment," Dominic said, breaking the moment as he turned to his father and spoke in low tones. Their conversation enveloped in an air of authority and respect. I felt the tension shift slightly, giving me a moment to breathe. The restaurant was alive with chatter and clinking glasses, but in this corner, everything felt amplified, charged with unspoken words and shared histories. As Dominic leaned closer to his father, my gaze wandered. I took in the lavish surroundings, the rich mahogany tables, the soft candlelight flickering against the walls adorned with dark portraits. This wasn't just a restaurant, it was a domain, a place where power dynamics played out over plates of exquisite food and fine wine. I was a mere spectator in a world that seemed to operate under its own rules. "Are you enjoying your evening, Sophia?" The voice of Mr. Caruso broke my reverie. His piercing gaze was now focused on me, and I felt the weight of his scrutiny. "I am, thank you," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's quite a lovely place." He nodded, his expression inscrutable. A good meal is essential. It bonds families, and it can also create alliances. His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I shifted slightly in my seat, feeling the tension radiate through the room. "Dad," Dominic returned, his tone cutting through the tension. "Sophia has a knack for making things interesting." There was a lightness in his voice that seemed at odds with the seriousness of our situation, yet it drew me in. "Interesting?" Mr. Caruso echoed, his brows slightly raised. "In what way?" Before I could answer, Dominic interjected. "She managed to save you from an embarrassing moment tonight." His eyes sparkled with mischief, but I could sense the underlying sincerity. "I think that deserves a toast." "Indeed," his father replied, a hint of a smile breaking through his stoic demeanor. "To unexpected allies." We raised our glasses, the clink resonating like a promise in the air. As I took a sip of the rich wine, I felt a rush of warmth spread through me. For a fleeting moment, I belonged here, in this world that was so foreign yet so intoxicating. "Tell me, Sophia," Mr. Caruso continued, his look intense, "what do you know about our family?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I was conscious of the weight of my answer. "Not much, really. Just what I've heard," I answered cautiously. "You're respected." "Respected, yes," he mused, a slight smirk on his lips. "But also feared. That's the reality of our business." His tone turned serious. "Understand that our lives are not as simple as they may appear." "I understand," I replied, feeling the weight of his words. The idea of their world being more than just crime and power had begun to seep into my consciousness. There was a complexity, a history that shaped their lives and decisions. In that moment, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in Dominic's gaze as he listened to his father. It was a rare moment, one that hinted at the pressures he faced every day. "Where are you from, Sophia?" Dominic asked suddenly, redirecting the conversation. "Born and raised in Brooklyn," I replied, grateful for the change in subject. "I went to school there, worked my way through various jobs, and now I'm just trying to get by like everyone else." "Brooklyn," he echoed, nodding thoughtfully. "A tough place, indeed. I respect that." The conversation flowed between us, and slowly, the initial tension began to dissolve. I caught snippets of their laughter, the banter between father and son, revealing the nuances of their relationship. It was clear they had shared many experiences, both good and bad, that had forged them into who they were. As dinner progressed, I found myself drawn deeper into their world, fascinated by the way they navigated it together. It was a dance of power and respect, one that seemed to both bind them and restrict them. My heart raced with the realization that I was beginning to feel a sense of belonging, a connection that transcended the danger lurking in the shadows. "Sophia?" Dominic's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "I need to discuss something with you." "Of course," I replied, my pulse quickening. The way he said my name sent a cascade of warmth through me, a reminder of the chemistry that simmered just beneath the surface. He leaned in closer, his eyes searching mine. "I want you to be part of my world, but it won't be easy. You'll be exposed to dangers you can't begin to imagine." I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. "Dominic, Let me finish," he interrupted gently, his gaze intense. "I won't pretend this is a fairy tale, but I can promise you protection, loyalty, and a chance to carve out a space for yourself in a life that's far from ordinary." His words wrapped around me like a silk shroud, both comforting and terrifying. "And what if I don't want that?" I asked, testing the waters of my own resolve. "Then I will respect your choice," he said, his voice steady. "But know that the moment you stepped into my life, you became someone I want to protect. That changes everything." The air between us thickened, and I could feel the tension building. My heart raced as I considered my next words carefully. What if I'm not strong enough to handle it? He reached for my hand across the table, his touch igniting a spark that sent shivers through me. "You are stronger than you know, and I will help you discover that strength." In that moment, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. The world outside was chaotic, but here, with Dominic, I felt a sense of clarity. I could either walk away and return to my safe but mundane life, or take a leap into the unknown, risking everything for a chance at something extraordinary. The choice lay before me, and the weight of it was both exhilarating and daunting. But one truth rang clear in my heart. Dominic Caruso was more than just a mafia boss. He was a man who saw me, recognized my worth, and offered me a place beside him in a world filled with shadows and light. As our eyes locked, I knew there was no turning back. I had been drawn into a web of passion, danger, and undeniable connection. And for the first time in my life, I felt alive.